Yo, man, that's pretty deep, man. I mean, the melanin. I didn't know melanin was that deep. And I know a lot of people out there didn't know. But I also was looking at your book the other day, and I noticed that you talk about Kemit. So, I know you as a brother. I see you with the Ankh a lot of times. And I think right now you got the Uchat on now. You got the. So, explain to us a little bit about Kemit.
Well, Kemit is the African term for the landmass that the Greeks later came and named Egypt. But in Kemit, we see essentially the culinary or the pinnacle of black intelligence. So when we look in Western civilization and we see phenomena such as the Renaissance period, and we see a period of men like Michelangelo, and then after the Renaissance, you had a high Renaissance where Michelangelo dies, then Raphael steps in, and you see the pinnacle of not only art, but culture, science, music, writing. Kemet was the pinnacle of that, but not only just writings and science, it was the pinnacle of occult knowledge, mystical knowledge, astrophysics. When we look at Kemet, we're looking at the foundation for what we call consciousness on this planet. From Kemet, we get later the Olmecs and all of these later civilizations, the Sumerians. Although ancient, the hub and the foundation, what set the standard for what we call the human paradigm began and was disseminated through Kemet, which was a matriarchal system that migrated from southern Africa and reached its pinnacle in northern Africa in Kemet. But a highly advanced construct, being that they not only dealt with science from how we view it as scientists, physicists, they dovetailed into the hypercube, space-time travel, alternate dimensions, parallel universes, things of this nature. And what they left, even in their hieroglyphic systems, that our greatest minds, be they black, white, Asian, whatever, are still catching up to in our so-called modern era. It's roughly going to be 2010 now, and our greatest minds are still at the feet and the heels of the great pharaohs and queens that ruled Kemet.
Man, so how old do you think Kemet is?
I would, if I have to take the roughest guess, I would say no younger than 30,000 years.
Wow, that's way older than what the archaeologists and the Egyptologists say.
True, because again, when we look at Egyptologists, we're dealing with a pseudoscience, because the Egyptologist is essentially a Caucasian who is trying to analyze the same culture that gave birth to them. So when we look at an Egyptologist is no different than a third grader going up to his teacher and trying to analyze his teacher and question and trivialize his teacher and the lessons that he has. Now, as a third grader, you've only got your very, very basic foundation. And when we look at Egyptologists, we're dealing with a Caucasian system, because the Greeks, the Romans, sat at the heels of the pharaoh, of the black queen of Kemet, and got their first taste of the occult, their first taste of science, mathematics, all the way down to bathing from the great Egyptians. So everything within European culture that is considered to be European or part of the Renaissance was birthed through Kemet and their contributions, which are extensive.
You ain't lying. So you saying that the Europeans were they were students to Egypt or Kemet. How does the impact of Kemet on Christianity play out?
Extensive, because when we look at Kemet and Christianity, we see the actual model for what we call the Judeo-ethic, meaning it set the standard for the criteria, the foundation, and the actual background for what became Judaism first, Christianity, then later Islam. In Kemet, ancient Egypt, we find the first reference to the Quran, which later Christians called the Christ. So when we look at the situation where we have a dying and rising Savior in Jesus the Christ, we see the same parallel that set the standard in ancient Kemit thousands of years before there was even a Moses, a Jesus, or even a Enoch being referred to. When we look at in Kemit, we see the god Asar, who the Greeks and Romans called Osiris. And in him, we see the first resurrection, because it was Asar who died and was resurrected in the form of Heru. Even in English language today, like, we can look at Christianity, but when somebody makes an outstanding accomplishment, when somebody does something amazing, goes above and beyond the natural causes and sets the standard for bravery, we call them a hero, which is a direct reference to Heru. So in Heru, we see the first dying and rising Savior. And like Christ, several thousand years before the birth of Christ, we see Heru, born of a virgin birth through the goddess Offset, who the Greeks call Isis. We see, just like Christ, at the age of roughly, 12, the god Anu, or Anpu, blessed and baptized Heru. And we see the same traditions, the oral traditions, taken from strictly oral traditions, which had metaphysical references, meaning the Kemetics gave praise to what was known as the Neters, which is a Kemetic term for God, but they didn't worship multiple gods. They recognized the multiple aspects of the Creator and broke it down into 10 spheres that became known as the Tree of Life. Now, the primary spheres, or the middle path of the Tree of Life, became the Holy Trinity of Christianity, because at the top of the tree we have Asar. Right in the middle of the tree, at the solar plexus, we have Heru, which became Christ. The Virgin Mary right up under Heru in the Tree of Life, being Offset. So with the Tree of Life system, or the Medun Neter, the Pa'ut Neteru, as it's called in the Kemit, we see literally the foundation of where a system of higher knowledge that use anthropomorphic systems, meaning taking animal-like figures to teach a higher lesson and putting them in an animal or a human form. Christianity went the next step further. Instead of saying, although we're giving you these human forms, we're giving you Jesus, we're giving you Mary, Christianity took out the fact that they were taking anthropomorphized characters that were used to teach higher concepts and turned these concepts into actual living, breathing characters. So instead of telling you that they went to the African Nile Valley, adopted the spiritual system, and because when we look at Rome and Greece, they had no religious system. When we look at Rome, what is the word Rome? Rome comes from the word Romulus, which is a Roman god. The Romans and the Greeks gave praise to Romulus. Who is Romulus? Romulus was a homosexual deity. His brother's name was Remus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You can go to the average art institute and see depictions of them. When you look at the book of Revelation, in it, Daniel said, he saw a four-headed beast, and the four heads broke down in the Persia, Greece, Babylon, and the fourth one was so bad it should be his own, and that was Rome. Now, when we speak of the beast, the icon of Romans, the same people who produced this religion, their icon was the mark of the beast. You can go to any art institute and see the Roman icon of Romulus, and you'll see two European child sucking from the teeth or breastfeeding a wolf or a beast. So from that system, we get the Roman construct that took